Marcus didn't have much, just $20 in his pocket and a backpack on his shoulders, but when he saw the sick German shepherd at the auction, something in the dog's eyes called to him. No one else wanted the weak, undernourished animal. They said it wouldn't survive the week. Marcus didn't care. He spent his last dollar to save it. He didn't know the dog belonged to James Rothschild, a lonely billionaire who had been searching everywhere for his missing companion. In his massive penthouse, James stared at the dog's photo, wondering where his best friend had gone. Could a homeless man with nothing but a heart of gold teach a billionaire the true meaning of love? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound journal was the last thing Marcus had from his old life. Its pages, worn and dog-eared, held memories of better days, detailed notes about animal care, treatment protocols, and the occasional sketch of a particularly memorable patient. He kept it wrapped in plastic, safe from the elements that threatened everything else he owned. Tonight, like most nights, he huddled in the doorway of St. Michael's Church, using his backpack as a pillow. The spring air carried a bitter chill, but at least the rain had stopped. He pulled out the journal, running his fingers over the embossed initials. MT Sterling Valley Veterinary Clinic. 8 months. That's how long it had been since he'd lost everything. The clinic where he'd worked for 12 years had been bought out by a corporate chain. They'd called it restructuring, but what it really meant was that dedicated staff like Marcus were suddenly redundant. He'd had savings, of course, enough for 3 months of rent, maybe 4 if he stretched. But then his mother's cancer came back, and the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Every penny went to her treatment, her comfort, her final days. He'd do it again in a heartbeat. The shelter system was a maze of rules and limitations. 2 nights here, 3 nights there, never enough beds to go around. Marcus learned quickly which places were safest, which soup kitchens served the best food, which library branches were warmest during the day. He kept himself clean, kept his dignity intact as best he could. Some of the other homeless folks had dogs, companions in their hardship. Marcus would often share what little medical knowledge he could, helping with mange, checking for infections, showing them how to wrap injured paws. It wasn't much, but it kept his skills sharp and his heart from completely breaking. The auction house wasn't a place he usually visited. But that morning, seeking shelter from a sudden downpour, he ducked inside just as they were setting up. The auctioneer, a portly man with thinning hair, was arguing with someone in the back room. "We can't sell it like this," the other voice insisted. "Look at it, it's half dead." "It's on the manifest," the auctioneer replied. "Found wandering downtown, no chip, no collar. Policy says it goes to auction." Marcus's curiosity drew him toward the commotion. In a cage at the back of the room lay a German shepherd, its ribs clearly visible through matted fur. The dog's eyes were dull with fever, its breathing labored, but when it caught sight of Marcus, its tail thumped weakly against the cage floor. "Looks like pneumonia," Marcus muttered, professional instincts kicking in, probably secondary to malnutrition. The auctioneer turned, startled. "You know something about dogs? Used to be a vet assistant." Marcus knelt by the cage, careful not to make sudden movements. The dog's eyes followed him, alert despite its condition. "This one's been on the streets a while, but it's not a stray. Look at the wear pattern on those teeth. Someone's been giving it dental chews. And see that spot on the shoulder? That's from a service vest. Service dog or not, it's going up for auction in an hour." The auctioneer shrugged. "Though I doubt anyone will bid. Who wants a sick dog?" Marcus reached into his pocket, feeling the single $20 bill he'd earned, helping unload trucks at the food bank. It was supposed to last him the week. But something in the dog's eyes called to him, a dignity, a resilience he recognized all too well. He waited through the auction, watching as furniture, electronics, and various unclaimed items found new owners. When they brought out the dog, there was a collective murmur of dismay from the crowd. The auctioneer started at $50, then quickly dropped to $25 when no hands went up. $20! Marcus called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The auctioneer's gavel fell with a sharp crack. Sold to the gentleman in the back. As he signed the paperwork, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote his name, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if he'd just made a terrible mistake. He had no home, barely enough food for himself, and now a sick dog to care for. But when the German shepherd pressed its fevered head against his leg, looking up at him with eyes that held nothing but trust, Marcus knew he'd made the only choice he could. He pulled out his journal, turned to a fresh page, and began to write. Patient, German shepherd, adult male, severe malnutrition and respiratory infection. Treatment begins immediately. He didn't know it then, but that entry would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone it would touch in the days to come. James Rothschild's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Manhattan's most exclusive residential tower, but lately it felt more like a mausoleum than a home. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a crystal tumbler of untouched scotch in his hand, staring at the latest batch of missing dog posters his assistant had prepared. "We've covered every neighborhood within a 10-mile radius," Sarah Chen reported, her tablet displaying a map dotted with red pins. "The reward is up to $100,000, and we've got every shelter and vet clinic in the tri-state area on alert." James barely nodded, his eyes fixed on Max's photo. The German shepherd looked regal in his service vest, sitting proudly beside James's wheelchair, a wheelchair that had been gathering dust in the corner since Max had helped him walk again. 3 weeks, James murmured. He's never been gone this long. Sarah watched her boss with concern. In the 5 years she'd worked for him, she'd never seen him so undone. The public knew James Rothschild as the ruthless tech innovator who'd transformed robotic prosthetics, the billionaire who'd risen from his own tragedy to build an empire. But they didn't know about the nights Max had kept him sane during rehabilitation, or how the dog had given him a reason to push through the pain. "The security footage shows him chasing something into traffic," Sarah reminded gently. "He must have gotten disoriented in the storm." James set down his scotch and picked up Max's favorite toy, a worn tennis ball that still carried traces of tooth marks. He was trained better than that. Something must have really spooked him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent billions developing technology to help people walk again, yet it was a dog, a simple, loving animal, that had truly saved him after the accident. Max had been there through every grueling physical therapy session, every frustrated outburst, every small victory. "Should I increase the reward?" Sarah asked, already typing. "Double it," James replied. "And add my private number to the posters. I don't care about the crank calls anymore. If someone has him—" He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what Max meant to him. After his wife's death in the same accident that had nearly cost him his legs, the dog had become more than a service animal. Max was family. James pulled up his own tablet, scrolling through hundreds of photos. Max on his first day home from the service dog training center. Max helping him navigate stairs. For the first time post-surgery, Max dozed off during board meetings, curled up under the conference table. "Sir?" Sarah's voice pulled him back to the present. "There's something else." The animal recovery team found traces of Max's scent near the auction district, but the trail goes cold at Morgan Street. James straightened, a spark of his old intensity returning. "Show me!" The map on the wall screen highlighted a maze of narrow streets and abandoned warehouses. The area had been slated for redevelopment, one of his company's projects, in fact, but construction hadn't started yet. "He could be anywhere in there," Sarah said. "It's a rough neighborhood, lots of homeless camps, and get me everything. You can on the local shelters, soup kitchens, anyone who might have seen him." James was already moving, his limp barely noticeable as he paced. "And contact that auction house again. If he wandered into their territory, already did, sir. They claim they haven't seen any German shepherds come through." James stopped. At the window again, looking down at the city that seemed to have swallowed his best friend. Somewhere out there, Max was lost, possibly hurt. The thought of him suffering, alone in the cold. "Keep looking," he said firmly. "He's out there and he needs me." What James couldn't know was that at that very moment, just a few miles away, a homeless man was sharing his last bit of food with a sick German shepherd, writing detailed care, notes in a weathered journal, and unknowingly setting in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. The abandoned loading dock behind the old textile factory wasn't much, but it offered shelter from the wind and prying eyes. Marcus had discovered it weeks ago, a forgotten corner of the city where he could get a decent night's sleep without being hassled by security or other homeless people looking for territory. Tonight, though, he wasn't alone. The German shepherd lay on his unrolled sleeping bag, each breath a wheeze that tightened Marcus's chest with worry. He'd managed to beg a few scraps of chicken from Ming's kitchen at closing time, but the dog had only managed a few bites before turning away. "Okay, buddy," Marcus muttered, pulling out his journal. "Let's see what we're dealing with." His hands moved with practiced efficiency, despite the cold, checking gums, lymph nodes, listening to the chest with gentle fingers pressed against ribs. In the dim light of his dollar store flashlight, he wrote, "Temperature elevated, estimated. Severe congestion in both lung fields, malnutrition evident, muscle wasting particularly notable around hips and shoulders. Despite condition, coat quality suggests recent good health, training evident in responses to basic commands. Conclusion, not a long-term stray." The dog watched him write, tail thumping weakly whenever Marcus looked his way. There was something in those eyes, an intelligence, a gratitude that made Marcus's throat tight. "You need antibiotics," he told his patient, "but this is the best I can do right now." He pulled out the small first aid kit he kept in his backpack, basic supplies scrounged from free clinics and sympathetic pharmacy workers. The aspirin would help with the fever at least. Crushing the tablet between 2 spoons, he mixed the powder with a bit of canned tuna he'd been saving for himself. The dog accepted this offering more readily, licking the spoon clean. "You need a name," Marcus said, stroking the matted fur. "Can't keep calling you Buddy." He thought about the way the dog's eyes had lit up at the auction house, how something in that gaze had given him hope when he thought he had nothing left to give. "That's it then, hope." The dog's ears perked slightly at the name. "Yeah, you like that, hope it is." Through the night, Marcus kept vigil. Every hour, he checked Hope's breathing, made notes, offered water. When the dog shivered, Marcus draped his own coat over him, ignoring the bite of the spring air on his skin. "Had a dog like you once," he told Hope, keeping his voice low and soothing. "Back when I worked at the clinic. German shepherd named Duke. Belonged to this old lady who'd bring him in every month for emergencies that were really just excuses to talk to someone. Used to drive Dr. Matthews crazy. But I got it. Sometimes a pet is all the family you've got." Hope's eyes drooped, but his tail kept up its gentle thumping. Marcus smiled, remembering other nights, other animals he'd helped through crisis. "The trick is getting through the first night," he continued, as much to himself as to the dog. "That's what we always told worried owners. Make it through the night and there's hope." He checked his watch, a cheap digital thing that kept decent time. Almost midnight. The aspirin seemed to be helping. Hope's breathing was a little easier. Though still labored, Marcus tore out a fresh page in his journal and began sketching a treatment plan. Simple supportive care was all he could manage. But maybe it would be enough. Fluids, rest, fever control. He'd need to find better food tomorrow, maybe see if the shelter clinic had any expired antibiotics they'd be willing to share. "Just hang in there," he whispered, settling down beside Hope. "We'll figure this out together." The dog shifted closer, pressing against Marcus's leg. Despite the fever, despite the obvious discomfort, Hope's presence was oddly comforting. For the first time in months, Marcus didn't feel quite so alone. He kept writing in his journal until his flashlight began to dim, documenting every detail of Hope's condition. If nothing else, he'd make sure this dog got the care he deserved, even if it meant going hungry himself for a few days. What Marcus didn't write down, what he could barely admit to himself, was how much he needed this too. This chance to help, to heal, to be useful again. In saving Hope, he might just save a piece of himself as well. The private investigator's report landed on James's desk at 6 a.m., along with his third cup of coffee. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed another sleepless night, spent reviewing security footage from every camera in a 5-block radius of Morgan Street. "We've got something," Sarah announced, pulling up a grainy video on the wall screen. "Convenience store camera. 3 days ago." James leaned forward, squinting at the image. There, for just a moment, a German shepherd crossed the frame. Even through the poor quality and awkward angle, he recognized the distinctive white patch on the chest. "Max," he breathed. "Play it again." The footage showed the dog moving slowly, head down, not the confident stride James remembered. Something was wrong. "He looks sick," Sarah said quietly. The investigator interviewed the store owner. "Says he's seen the dog a few times, usually early morning or late night." James pressed his fingers against his temples. "What about the posters in that area?" "All torn down within hours of being put up." Sarah pulled up another report. "It's a rough neighborhood. People there don't trust anything that looks official." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Rothschild, the development team is waiting in the conference room." "Cancel it," James snapped. "Cancel everything today." Sarah cleared her throat. "Sir, the prosthetics launch can wait." He stood, limping to the window. The morning sun caught the edges of the buildings, creating long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the auction district. "We're close, Sarah. I can feel it." She watched him with concern, noting how his hand unconsciously rubbed his left leg, the one that still gave him trouble on cold mornings. The leg Max had helped him learn to use again. "There's more," she said. "The investigator talked to some locals. They mentioned a homeless man who's been helping sick strays in the area, former vet tech or something similar." James turned sharply. "And you're just mentioning this now? We're trying to track him down, but people like that, they tend to move around, stay under the radar." The wall screen flickered with new images. A soup kitchen line, a church doorway, the loading dock of an abandoned factory. In each one, just at the edges, glimpses of what might be Max. "Look at the timestamps," Sarah pointed out. "He's staying in this general area, probably too sick to go far." James felt his chest tighten. Max was out there, suffering, while he sat in his climate-controlled penthouse. The thought was unbearable. "Get the car," he ordered. "We're going down there." "Sir, it's not safe." "I don't care." His voice cracked slightly. "That's my best friend out there, Sarah, the only one who—" He trailed off, but she understood. "The only one who'd seen him at his worst, who'd helped him learn to walk again after the accident that took his wife, who'd given him a reason to keep fighting when the pain and grief threatened to overwhelm him." "Give me an hour," Sarah compromised. "Let me arrange proper security, talk to local contacts. We'll do this." "Right." James nodded reluctantly, turning back to the footage. Frame by frame he studied every detail, the way Max moved, the surroundings, anything that might help. A notification popped up on his tablet. Another development meeting? Another deadline. Another milestone in his company's relentless march forward. He dismissed it without reading. None of it mattered right now. "Sir?" Sarah paused at the door. What if someone's already helping him? This homeless vet person? Then I'll make sure they're rewarded." James's jaw tightened. "But Max needs proper medical care. He needs to come home." What he didn't say, what he couldn't quite admit, was how much he needed Max to come home. The penthouse felt like a museum. Without the click of claws on hardwood, the jingle of tags, the warm presence that had kept loneliness at bay for so long. As Sarah left to make arrangements, James pulled up the security footage one more time. Somewhere in those shadowy streets, Max was fighting to survive, and James would turn the city upside down to find him, no matter the cost. He didn't know that just a few blocks away, in the pre-dawn quiet, a homeless man was sharing his breakfast with a sick German shepherd, writing careful notes in a worn journal, and slowly nursing Max, now called Hope, back to health. Dawn broke over the loading dock, painting the concrete in shades of gold. Marcus hadn't slept much, too worried about Hope's labored breathing to do more than doze. But his vigil had been worth it. The dog's fever had finally broken around. 4 in the morning. "Looking better already, aren't you?" Marcus scratched behind Hope's ears, earning a gentle tail wag. The German shepherd's eyes were clearer today, more alert. He'd even managed to keep down the water Marcus had been offering, in small amounts throughout the night. Mrs. Chen from the corner store was the first to spot them. She came around the back of the building carrying a plastic bag that smelled of chicken soup. "For your new friend," she said, setting the bag down. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, took in Hope's condition. "Dog is sick," Marcus nodded. "Pneumonia, probably, but he's fighting." She clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, she returned with a handful of pills in a small envelope. "From my son's dog. Antibiotics. Very strong." Marcus examined the pills, his professional training kicking in. Amoxicillin, exactly what Hope needed. "Mrs. Chen, I can't take." Her tone brooked no argument. "Dog needs medicine. You give medicine. Simple." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood's informal network. By midday, Marco from the food truck had dropped off a container of rice and shredded chicken. Jenny from the laundromat brought an old blanket. Even Tom, the gruff security guard from the warehouse next door, looked the other way when Marcus moved Hope into a more sheltered corner of the loading dock. "Used to train police dogs," Tom mentioned during his afternoon rounds. He watched Hope for a moment. Professional interest evident. "This one's had training. Good breeding, too. Someone spent a lot of money on him." Marcus nodded, having noticed the same things. "He's definitely not a street dog. Must have gotten lost somehow. No chip. Couldn't check. The auction house. Should have scanned him, but..." Marcus shrugged. The auction house's negligence had probably saved Hope's life, given their usual policy of euthanizing sick animals. Throughout the day, Marcus maintained his journal entries, documenting Hope's progress. Day 2, temperature normalizing. Breathing still congested but improved. Appetite returning gradually. Started antibiotics. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Patient showing increased alertness and responsiveness. He shared his food with Hope, carefully portioning out the donations too. Make them last. The dog ate delicately, with the manners of one used to regular meals, another clue to his past life. "You must have had a good home once," Marcus mused, watching Hope settle into the new blanket. "Someone out there probably misses you." The thought brought a pang of worry. What would he do if Hope's owner showed up? The rational part of him knew he should hope for that. Hope deserved a real home, proper medical care, all the things Marcus couldn't provide. But the idea of losing him... A commotion from the street interrupted his thoughts. A sleek black car was moving slowly through the neighborhood, drawing suspicious looks from the locals. Through the tinted windows, Marcus caught a glimpse of someone looking intently at buildings and alleyways. Hope's ears perked up, but he made no sound. Still too weak to do more than lift his head. "Just someone lost," Marcus assured him, though. Something about the car made him uneasy. He'd seen others like it lately, crawling through the neighborhood like sharks searching for prey. That evening, Mei Ling from the Chinese restaurant across the street stopped by with her phone. "Look," she said, showing Marcus a photo she'd taken. In it he was sharing his breakfast with Hope, the rising sun casting long shadows behind them. "Delete it," Marcus said quickly, but she shook her head. "Is beautiful," she insisted. "Shows kindness. World needs more kindness." Later, writing in his journal by flashlight, Marcus reflected on the day. The entry began as his usual clinical notes, but evolved into something more personal. Community support invaluable to treatment plan. Patient responding well to medication and care, beginning to understand why I was meant to find him, not just to heal him, but perhaps to heal something in myself as well. Whatever brought us together, I'm grateful for it. Even if our time is limited, even if I have to let him go eventually, this matters. This helps. Hope slept peacefully beside him, breathing easier now. In the distance, sirens wailed and the city hummed its endless urban lullaby. But here, in their quiet corner, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. 1 week into his treatment, Hope stood up on his own for the first time. Marcus was dozing against the loading dock wall when he felt something wet touch his cheek. He opened his eyes to find the German shepherd standing over him, tail wagging, eyes bright and clear. "Look at you!" Marcus scrambled to his feet, hands automatically running over Hope's body, checking vitals with practiced ease. The dog's temperature was normal, his breathing clear. The horrible rattling cough had disappeared, and his ribs were less prominent thanks to regular meals. Marcus pulled out his journal, now filled with a week's worth of detailed observations. Day 7, complete turnaround. Patient showing remarkable recovery. Respiratory infection resolved, energy levels returning to normal, beginning to display trained behaviors more consistently. Those behaviors were becoming more noticeable each day. Hope sat without being told, waited patiently for food, and responded to hand signals Marcus had never taught him. Yesterday, when an elderly woman had stumbled near their spot, Hope had automatically moved to support her, pressing against her leg until she regained her balance. "You're something special, aren't you?" Marcus rubbed Hope's ears, earning a happy grunt. The dog wore only a simple rope collar now. Marcus had removed the old leather one days ago, cleaning it of dirt and grime. He'd meant to put it back on, but something about it bothered him. It seemed too high-tech for a regular collar, with its strange metal clips and reinforced band. Across town, in a sleek office tower, Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen in disbelief. "Sir!" she called, out fingers flying over her keyboard. The backup tracker, it just came online. James Rothschild moved faster than anyone had seen him move in weeks, crossing the room in long strides. "Where? The signal's weak, but it's coming from the auction district. Looks like the primary GPS failed, but the backup emergency beacon in his medical collar just activated. Must have finally dried out enough to power up." James leaned over her shoulder, watching the blinking dot on the map. "How accurate?" "Within 50 meters. But—" Sarah hesitated. "The signal's stationary, has been for days according to the logs. Either the collar was removed or—" "He's alive." James's voice was firm. "Show me the exact location." The map zoomed in on an abandoned industrial area. The dot pulsed steadily, centered on an old textile factory. "Get the team ready," James ordered. "We're going down there now." "Sir? Maybe we should send the investigators first?" "No more. Waiting." He was already heading for the door. "Have medical standing by, just in case." Back at the loading dock, Marcus was teaching Hope a new game. He'd found a tennis ball in the alley, and though the dog was still too weak for much exercise, his eyes lit up at the sight of it. "Easy throws only," Marcus cautioned, tossing the ball gently. Hope caught it with surprising gentleness, bringing it back with perfect retrieval form. Tom, the security guard, watched from his post, shaking his head in amazement. "That's one expensive animal you've got there. Those aren't just tricks. That's professional service dog training. Must be worth a fortune." Marcus's heart sank. He'd been trying not to think about that, about what it meant. A dog this well-trained, this special. Someone must be looking for him. Hope dropped the ball at Marcus's feet, looking up expectantly. His coat was starting to shine again, the good food and care bringing back its natural luster. Even the white patch on his chest seemed brighter. "You're too good for the streets," Marcus murmured, scratching Hope's favorite spot under his chin. "Bet your real family misses you something fierce." As if understanding, Hope pressed closer, resting his head on Marcus's knee. For a moment, they sat together in the warm afternoon sun, two lost souls who had somehow found each other. Then a sleek black SUV turned into the alley, followed by another and another. Hope's ears perked up, his body tensing slightly. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd seen enough episodes of Animal ER during his clinic days to recognize a professional medical transport when he saw one. "It's okay," he whispered, more to himself than to Hope. "It's going to be okay." But as the vehicles drew closer and men in expensive suits began to emerge, Marcus wondered if he was about to lose the one thing that had given his life meaning again. The Second Chance Animal Shelter occupied a cramped storefront 2 blocks from the loading dock. Marcus hadn't planned on volunteering. He'd only gone in to ask about antibiotics for Hope. But when he'd spotted the overwhelmed vet tech struggling with a frightened pit bull, his instincts had kicked in. "Easy now," he'd said, demonstrating the proper restraint technique. "See how she calms down when you support her chest like this?" That had been 3 days ago. Now he spent his mornings helping with basic treatments, his experienced hands and gentle manner making him invaluable with the more difficult cases. Hope came with him, still wearing his simple rope collar, the mysterious high-tech one safely tucked away in Marcus's backpack. "You've got magic hands," Rita, the shelter manager, told him as he finished cleaning an infected wound on a stray cat. "Where did you learn all this?" "Sterling Valley Veterinary Clinic," Marcus answered, surprising himself with his honesty. "Worked there 12 years before the corporate buyout." Hope lay in the corner, watching the procedure with interest. Other dogs in the shelter were often anxious or excited, but he maintained a calm, almost professional demeanor that didn't go unnoticed. "Your dog's got serious training," Rita observed. "The way he stays out of the way but alert, that's service." Dog behavior. Before Marcus could respond, the shelter's front door chimed. A woman in an expensive business suit entered, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum. Something about her seemed out of place in the humble shelter. Too polished. Too corporate. "Can I help you?" Rita asked. "Sarah Chen," the woman replied, showing an ID badge. "I'm with the Rothschild Foundation. We're conducting a survey of local shelters." Marcus kept his head down, focusing on the cat, but his ears pricked up at the mention of the foundation. Everyone knew about James Rothschild's charitable work. It was hard to miss when his name was on half the medical buildings in the city. Hope, usually so calm, lifted his head and watched the newcomer intently. Sarah moved through the shelter with practiced efficiency, asking questions about capacity and funding needs, but her eyes kept drifting to where Marcus worked, watching his sure movements with the animals. "You have veterinary experience?" she asked finally. Marcus nodded, keeping his attention on his patient. "Some. We're always looking for skilled volunteers at our partner clinics," she said, holding out a business card. "Better equipment, proper facilities. Could be a good opportunity." The card was heavy, expensive. Marcus took it reluctantly, acutely, aware of his worn clothes and rough appearance. "I'll think about it." Hope chose that moment to stand and stretch, drawing Sarah's attention. She froze, staring at the German shepherd with an unreadable expression. "Beautiful dog," she said, carefully. "How long have you had him?" "He's just staying with me until he's better," Marcus answered, a protective note creeping into his voice. "Found him sick. Needed help." Sarah crouched down, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "May I?" Marcus nodded, and she approached. Hope slowly. The dog watched her with that same intense focus, but made no move to greet her. "Such intelligent eyes," she murmured. "You've taken very good care of him." "He's special," Marcus said simply. "Deserves the best I can give him." Sarah straightened up, smoothing her skirt. "Well, thank you for your time. Please consider reaching out about the volunteer position. We could use someone with your dedication." After she left, Rita whistled low. "Rothschild Foundation, that's big time. You should go for it." Marcus shrugged, but tucked the card into his journal. Hope came over and pressed against his leg, a warm, solid presence. "We're doing okay right where we are," he said, though part of him wondered what it would be like to work in a proper clinic again, to use his skills to their fullest. Later, in her car, Sarah made a phone call. "Sir, I think I found them, but there's something you should know. The man who has Max, he's not what we expected at all." James sat in the back of his parked SUV, watching the security feed from the cameras his team had discreetly placed around the shelter. His hands gripped his tablet so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "That's him," he whispered. "That's Max." On the screen, his German shepherd moved with familiar grace through the shelter's examination room, following a tall, thin man in worn clothes. The dog looked healthy, better than healthy. His coat gleamed. His movements were strong and sure. "Marcus Thompson," Sarah reported, pulling up a background file. "Former veterinary technician, 12 years experience. Lost his job in a corporate takeover, then spent his savings on his mother's cancer treatments. No criminal record. Been homeless about 8 months. James watched as Marcus knelt to examine a limping sheepdog. Max, they were calling him Hope, stayed, perfectly positioned at Marcus's side, exactly as he'd been trained. "He was sick?" James asked. Sarah nodded. "Severe pneumonia when Marcus found him at the auction. According to my sources, no one else would bid on him. They thought he wouldn't. Survived the week." The camera angle shifted, showing Marcus making notes in a battered journal. His movements were precise, professional. Even from the grainy footage, James could see the gentleness in his hands as he worked with the animals. "He spent his last, $20, Sarah continued softly. "Lived on the streets, shared his food, nursed Max back to health. The whole neighborhood helped, brought medicine, blankets, food." On the screen, Marcus scratched Max behind the ears, saying something they couldn't hear. The dog's tail wagged, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "He's happy," James said, surprise coloring his voice. "Look at how he follows him." "Sir," Sarah hesitated, "there's something else you should see." She pulled up footage from earlier that morning. Marcus sat on the loading dock steps, Max beside him. A small girl with leg braces approached, her mother hovering nervously behind. Without prompting, Max moved to the girl's side, positioning himself perfectly to support her weight. Marcus watched with quiet pride as the dog helped the child navigate the steps. "He's still doing it," James murmured, "still helping people." The scene shifted again. Marcus sharing his lunch with Max. Marcus reading his journal aloud to the dog during quiet moments. Marcus wrapping his own coat around Max during a sudden rain shower. "The neighborhood calls him the dog whisperer," Sarah said. "He's been helping their pets, teaching them basic care. The shelter wants to hire him, but they can't afford it." James leaned back, his thoughts churning. When he'd imagined finding Max, he'd pictured rescuing him from neglect or abuse. He'd imagined being the hero, swooping in to save his beloved companion. Instead, he found this, his dog, healthy and content, working alongside a man who had nothing yet gave everything. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked quietly. Through the tablet they watched as Marcus began packing up for the day. Max helped him gather his few possessions, each movement showing the deep bond between them. "He should be home," James said. But his voice lacked conviction. "He needs proper care, a real bed, his medical routines." "With all due respect, sir," Sarah interrupted, "look at him, really look." On screen, Marcus and Max walked together down the street. Despite his circumstances, Marcus moved with dignity, his head high, and Max matched his pace perfectly, not pulling ahead or lagging behind, just as he used to do with James. "I've spent millions on the best trainers in the world," James said softly, "trying to teach dogs to help people like they helped me. And here's this man, who has nothing, doing it naturally." A message flashed across Sarah's phone, the security team waiting for orders, ready to move in to reclaim Max, to end this chapter. James stared at the footage for a long moment. In his mind he saw himself after the accident, broken, angry, pushing away everyone who tried to help, until a dog taught him how to trust again, how to give and receive love without conditions. "Sir?" Sarah prompted. "Should I give the order?" James watched as Marcus and Max disappeared around a corner, two beings who had saved each other. "No," he said finally. "Not yet. I need to think." But deep down, he already knew. The hardest part of love is knowing when to let go and when to find a better way. In his penthouse office, James sat surrounded by reports about Marcus Thompson, employment records, performance reviews, newspaper clippings, fragments of a life derailed by circumstance rather than fault. "Sterling Valley Veterinary Clinic, 2010-2022, he read aloud. "Employee of the Year 4 times, started their emergency care program, implemented new tracking systems for patient care." Sarah set a fresh coffee on his desk. "There's more. I spoke to his former colleagues." She pulled up a video interview on the wall screen. A grey-haired veterinarian appeared, Dr. Matthews according to the caption. "Marcus, best damn tech I ever worked with, had a way with the difficult cases, the scared ones, the aggressive ones. Animals just trusted him. When the corporation bought us out, I offered to help him find another position. But then his mother got sick." The doctor's voice cracked slightly. "He spent everything on her care, wouldn't even let us take up a collection, said others needed it more." James picked up another report, bank records showing a steady drain of savings, all to medical bills. And hospice care. The final transfer had been for rent money, trying to keep his apartment just one more month. "He didn't fail," James murmured. "He chose this, chose to help someone he loved, no matter the cost." On his desk, a framed photo caught his eye. Himself and his late wife, Rebecca, Max sitting proudly between them. It was taken just weeks before the accident that had taken her and nearly claimed him. "What would you say about all this?" he asked. The photo quietly. Rebecca had always seen straight to the heart of things, had always known the right thing to do. Sarah's tablet chimed with an update. New footage from the shelter. The screen showed Marcus conducting impromptu training sessions with local pet owners. His expertise was obvious, but it was more than that. He taught with patience, with understanding, making complex medical concepts accessible to everyone. "Watch how he adapts," Sarah noted. When that woman couldn't afford heart medication for her dog, he showed her alternative therapies, dietary changes, ways to manage the condition. James nodded, remembering his own rehabilitation. The endless hours of physical therapy, the frustration, the pain. Max had been there through all of it, making it bearable, giving him a reason to push through one more day. "He's doing what I've been trying to do," James realized. "All my foundation's work, all the research into service animals, he's doing it naturally, with nothing but knowledge and compassion." His phone buzzed. Another board meeting about the prosthetics launch. He silenced it without looking. "Pull up his journal entries," he ordered. "The ones about Max." Sarah hesitated. "Sir, those are private, please." The screen filled with Marcus's careful handwriting, detailed medical observations interspersed with personal reflections. Day 12. Hope's recovery continues to exceed expectations. His training becomes more evident daily. Helped Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter with her walking exercises today. The way he naturally positions himself for support. This is no ordinary dog. He has a gift, a purpose. I'm just grateful to be part of his journey, however long it lasts. James walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the cityscape beyond. In his mind, he saw Max in those early days after the accident. How the dog had learned to anticipate his falls, how to brace him on bad days, how to encourage him to keep trying when all he wanted was to give up. "He named him Hope," James said softly. "Sir? When I first got Max, I named him after strength. Maximilian, the greatest. Because that's what I needed then. Someone to help me be strong again." He turned from the window. But Marcus, he had nothing left but hope. And that's what he saw in Max, what Max helped him find again. Sarah watched her boss carefully. In 5 years, she'd never seen him so conflicted. "The security team is still standing by," she reminded him. "One word, and we can bring Max home today." James picked up another photo from his desk. Max on his first day of service dog training. So proud, so eager to help. "But what if he is home?" James asked, more to himself than Sarah. "What if this isn't about ownership or legal rights? What if it's about something more important?" He sat heavily in his chair, pulling up the shelter's financial records on his tablet. Years of struggling to stay open, of making do with too little, of turning away animals they couldn't afford to help. "Get me everything you can on property values in that neighborhood," he said finally, "and contact our lawyers. I want to know what it would take to set up a proper medical training facility there." Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "You're not going to claim him." "Oh, I'm going to claim him," James replied, a plan forming in his mind. "Just not in the way we thought. Because sometimes the best way to keep what you love is to let it grow into something even greater." The Coffee Bean was the only cafe in the neighborhood that didn't mind Marcus sitting for hours with just one cup of coffee. The owner, Mike, had a soft spot for Hope and often slipped them day-old pastries when business was slow. This morning, Marcus sat at his usual corner table, making notes in his journal about a limping retriever he'd treated at the shelter. Hope lay under the table, his head resting on Marcus's feet. The bell above the door chimed. Marcus didn't look up, not until he heard the distinct sound of someone struggling with crutches. Hope's head lifted, his training instantly engaging. "Easy," Marcus murmured. But Hope was already sliding out from under the table, moving with purpose toward the man who had just entered. The stranger was well dressed, though something about him seemed unpracticed with his obvious wealth, as if the expensive suit was a costume rather than a comfort. He balanced on his crutches, trying to manage both them and his leather briefcase. Without prompting, Hope positioned himself perfectly at the man's side, offering support. The stranger froze, staring down at the German shepherd with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry," Marcus called out, rising. "He's trained to help. Sometimes he just knows." "No, it's—" The man's voice caught slightly. "It's fine. He's very well trained." Hope stayed steady as the man made his way to the counter. Marcus watched carefully, ready to call the dog back, but something about the scene felt right. "Natural. Black coffee, please," the man ordered. "And whatever he's having." He nodded toward Marcus. "Oh, you don't have to. Please, it's the least I can do. Your dog just saved me from an embarrassing fall." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. That's very kind." Hope guided the man to Marcus's table, maintaining perfect position, until he was safely seated. Only then did the dog return to Marcus's side, though his eyes remained fixed on the stranger. "I'm James," the man said, extending his hand. "Marcus." The handshake was firm, brief. "And this is Hope." Something flickered in James's eyes at the name, but he simply nodded. "A fitting name. He seems to bring it to people." They sat in silence for a moment as Mike brought their coffee. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening, though he couldn't have said why. "You work with animals?" James asked, gesturing to the journal. "Used to. Now I volunteer at the shelter down the street, do what I can." With professional training, I'd guess. Hope's response was textbook service dog behavior. Marcus smiled. "Slightly. Takes one to know one. You've worked with service dogs before. You could say that." James shifted, his crutch scraping the floor. Hope immediately looked up, alert. "Had one myself after an accident. Best friend I ever had." "Had?" "Lost him. Few weeks ago." James's voice was carefully neutral. "Been looking ever since." Marcus's hand found Hope's head automatically, protective. "I'm sorry. That must be hard." "It was. Is." James took a sip of coffee. "But sometimes things happen for a reason. Sometimes what you lose finds its way to where it needs to be." Their eyes met over the coffee cups. In that moment Marcus knew who James was, knew who Hope had been, knew why this meeting felt so weighted with meaning. "He was sick," Marcus said quietly. When I found him, they said he wouldn't make it, but you saved him. We saved each other. James nodded slowly. Yes, I believe you did. Hope looked between them, tail sweeping the floor gently. There was no anxiety in his posture, no signs of stress, just calm acceptance. I should go, James said, gathering his crutches. But Marcus, thank you for everything you did for him, everything you're doing. He placed a business card on the table. Unlike Sarah's corporate card, this one was simple, understated, just a name and number. If you're ever interested in doing more, James continued, in helping more animals, more people, call me. No pressure, no strings, just possibilities. He levered himself up, waving away Hope's instinctive move to help. At the door, he paused. You named him well, he said, not turning around. Hope has a way of finding us when we need it most. After he left, Marcus sat for a long time, turning the card over in his hands. Hope rested his head on Marcus's knee, offering silent support. What do you think, boy? Marcus whispered. Ready for a new chapter? The dog's tail thumped once, decisive. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, hope came in unexpected forms, in a sick dog at an auction, in a chance meeting, over coffee, in the possibility of something more than just survival. He tucked the card carefully into his journal and began to write. The old newspaper clipping trembled in Marcus's hands. The headline read, Tech billionaire James Rothschild makes miraculous recovery with help of service dog. The photo showed a younger James, standing proudly beside a familiar German shepherd. Max, Marcus said softly, looking at Hope, who sat attentively between them in James's office. That was his name, wasn't it? James nodded, watching his dog, their dog, with gentle eyes. Still is, I suppose. Though Hope suits him too. They were sitting in James's private office, 30 stories above the city. Marcus felt out of place, in his worn clothes, but Hope's presence beside him kept him grounded. You could have just taken him back, Marcus said. You had every right. I could have. James leaned back in his chair. At first that was the plan, but then we saw how you cared for him, how you gave him everything when you had nothing. Marcus remembered the coffee shop meeting, the careful way James had approached him. It wasn't really a chance encounter, was it? No, James smiled slightly. Though Hope's reaction was completely genuine, he always did have good instincts about people. As if acknowledging this, Hope's tail thumped against the plush carpet. He seemed perfectly at ease, dividing his attention between both men with diplomatic fairness. When I lost him, James continued, I was ready to tear the city apart, spent millions on search teams, rewards, private investigators, but you found him with nothing but a kind heart and $20. Marcus touched the worn journal in his pocket. He was worth every penny, even if, he paused, steeling himself, even if it's time for him to go home. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. James pressed a button on his desk, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. It showed architectural plans, a modern building with extensive grounds. The Second Chance Shelter, James explained, or rather what it could become. State-of-the-art veterinary facilities, training programs for service animals, housing for staff and volunteers. Marcus stared at the plans, his professional eye, catching details that made his heart race. Surgery suites, rehabilitation pools, recovery wards, everything he'd ever dreamed of having at Sterling Valley. Why are you showing me this? Because I need someone to run it. James met his eyes directly, someone who understands both the medical and the human side, someone who can see the potential in what others might discard. Me? Marcus almost laughed. I'm homeless. I haven't practiced properly in months. You've never stopped practicing. Every animal you've helped at the shelter, every person you've taught basic care, every moment you spent saving Hope. James gestured to the dog. That's worth more than any corporate certification. Hope moved then, doing something Marcus had never seen before. He went to James first, pressing against his bad leg, offering support. Then he returned to Marcus, leaning into him with equal devotion. I think, James said softly, He's trying to tell us something. Maybe it's not about choosing. Maybe it's about building something bigger than both of us. Marcus pulled out his journal, touching its worn cover. Inside were hundreds of cases, notes, observations. His life's work continued even when he had nothing else. The shelter can't afford. The Rothschild Foundation can. James held up a hand as Marcus began to protest. This isn't charity. This is investment in expertise, in compassion, in hope. Outside the window, the city stretched out beneath them. Somewhere down there was the loading dock, where Marcus had spent countless nights nursing a sick dog back to health, where he'd found his purpose again. Take some time, James said. Think about it, but know this. Whatever you decide about the position, hope stays with you. You've earned that right 100 times over. Marcus looked at Hope, who gazed back with those wise, loving eyes. Then he looked at the plans again, seeing not just a building, but a future, a chance to help more animals, more people, a way to turn his own hope into something lasting. No need to think about it, he said. When do we start? James's business card sat on the conference room table between stacks of blueprints and budget proposals. In the week since their first honest conversation, it had transformed from a simple rectangle of paper into a bridge between two worlds. The initial funding will cover full renovation of the existing shelter, plus expansion into the adjacent warehouse space, Sarah explained, moving through her presentation with practiced efficiency. We're looking at a 6-month completion timeline. Marcus nodded, making notes in a new journal, a leather-bound gift from James, though he kept his old one close as well. Hope lay under the table, occasionally nudging both men's feet, as if ensuring they stayed on track. The training program is what interests me most, Marcus said, pulling up his own research on the tablet James had provided. Combining veterinary care with service animal development, it's never been done on this scale. That's why we need you. James leaned forward, his eyes bright with the same enthusiasm that had built his tech empire. Your experience bridges both worlds. You understand the medical side and the human element. Marcus turned to a fresh page, sketching out a rough organizational chart. We'll need at least 3 full-time veterinarians, specially trained in rehabilitation. Support staff, trainers. He paused. It's a lot of trust to put in someone who was homeless a week ago. I'm not trusting your circumstances, James replied. I'm trusting your actions. What you did for Hope, for Max, that's the kind of dedication we need. Hope's tail thumped at both names, comfortable now with either. The dog had adapted to their unusual arrangement with remarkable ease, splitting his time between Marcus's new apartment, a modest but comfortable place near the shelter, and James's penthouse. There's something else, Sarah interjected, pulling up a new document. The educational outreach program you proposed, Marcus, teaching basic veterinary care to low-income communities. It could save thousands of animals, Marcus finished. People want to help their pets, they just need the knowledge and resources. James smiled, remembering his own journey of learning to care for Max during his recovery. Add it to the proposal. In fact, make it a cornerstone. They worked through the afternoon, refining plans, adjusting budgets. Marcus's practical experience balanced James's grand vision, while Sarah kept them grounded in logistics. Hope moved between them, offering silent support and the occasional reminder to take breaks. One concern, Marcus said finally, touching the old journal in his pocket. The corporate takeover at Sterling Valley. It changed everything. The focus shifted from care to profit. I can't watch that happen again. That's why I'm not just funding this, James replied. I'm partnering in it. Equal stake, equal say. He pulled out a document, sliding it across the table. You'll own half the facility outright. No boards, no shareholders, just us, doing what's right. Marcus stared at the partnership agreement, its legal language spelling out a future he'd never imagined possible. Why? Because sometimes the best investments aren't about money. James reached down to scratch Hope's ears. Sometimes they're about believing in something bigger than yourself. Sarah cleared her throat softly. There's a press conference scheduled for next week. The media's already interested. It's quite a story. Homeless hero partners with tech billionaire. No, both men said simultaneously. James continued, this isn't about publicity. It's about the work. Marcus nodded, relieved. The animals don't care about headlines. They just need help. Speaking of which, Sarah pulled up a calendar. The city shelter called. They're over capacity, looking to transfer some cases. Tell them yes, Marcus said immediately. We can use the old clinic space temporarily. Start small while construction begins. You sure? James asked. It's not exactly the state-of-the-art facility we're planning. Marcus thought about his nights on the loading dock, caring for Hope with nothing but determination and donated supplies. Sometimes the best care doesn't need fancy equipment, just dedicated people and a lot of hope. Hope lifted his head at the word, looking between his two humans with what could only be described as approval. Well then, James said, reaching for the partnership agreement. Shall we make it official? Marcus took the pen, its weight suddenly representing everything he'd lost and found again. With Hope pressed against his leg and James waiting patiently, he signed his name, not just to a document, but to a future built on second chances and unwavering faith. Welcome to the Hope Animal Medical Center, James said, signing his own, name beside Marcus's, where every animal gets a second chance, and sometimes humans do too. The construction site hummed with activity as workers transformed the old warehouse into something new. Marcus stood with the architectural plans spread across a makeshift table, Hope at his feet, while local contractors discussed the renovation timeline. The surgery suite needs better ventilation, he pointed out, marking the blueprints, and the recovery ward should face east. Morning sun helps healing. Already noted, came James's voice as he approached, moving smoothly despite his slight limp. Sarah's handling the changes now. Over the past 3 weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm. James brought the vision and resources, while Marcus provided the practical knowledge that turned plans into reality. They met every morning to walk the site, Hope trotting between them, equally attentive to both. The neighborhood's curious, Marcus said, nodding toward a group of locals watching. From across the street, Mrs. Chen asked if we're really building a pet hospital for poor people. James smiled. What did you tell her? That we're building something for everyone. Marcus rolled up the plans. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about the training program. They moved through the construction site, Hope navigating the obstacles with practiced ease. Workers called out greetings. They'd grown used to the unusual sight of a billionaire and a former homeless man walking together, deep in conversation. The thing about service dogs, Marcus continued, is that the training usually focuses on the dog. But from what I've seen at the shelter, it's really about the connection, the trust between animal and human. James nodded, remembering his own early days with Max. It took weeks before I really trusted him to catch me if I fell. Exactly. So what if we didn't just train dogs? What if we trained partnerships? They reached what would become the main training area, a large open space with high windows. Marcus could already envision it filled with people and animals learning together. We pair each dog with their potential owner early, he explained. Enthusiasm building. Let them learn together, adapt to each other. The dog learns the person's specific needs, and the person learns to read the dog's signals. Like we did, James said softly, watching Hope demonstrate his point by subtly shifting position when James's bad leg showed signs of fatigue. You taught him well, Marcus observed. The foundation was there. That's why he knew how to help me with the sick animals at the shelter. We taught each other. James eased himself onto a stack of lumber, accepting Hope's immediate support. That's what you're really talking about, isn't it? Creating an environment where that kind of mutual learning can happen. Marcus pulled out his journal, the old one, its pages now a roadmap of their journey. Look at this. Day 3 with Hope, he started anticipating which supplies I'd need. By week 2, he was helping me detect fevers in other animals. He wasn't just following training, he was adapting it, adding your medical knowledge to his service training, James mused. Creating something new. A crash from the construction made them both jump. Hope remained calm, assessing the situation, before relaxing when no threat appeared. Both men smiled at the dog's professional behavior. "He really does belong to both of us now, doesn't he?" Marcus said. Was there ever any doubt? James reached down to ruffle Hope's ears. "He brought us together for a reason. All of this," he gestured at the building taking shape around them. "It started with his choice to trust you and your choice to help him." Marcus thought about that night at the auction, how close he'd come to walking away. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest decisions. Speaking of changes, James pulled out his tablet, bringing up a new document. The City Council approved our proposal for the mobile clinic program. Marcus's eyes lit up. This had been his idea. A van equipped with basic medical supplies, traveling to neighborhoods where people couldn't afford regular vet care. "We can start with preventive care," he said, already planning. "Vaccinations, basic treatments. Build trust with the communities, just like you did here." James gestured toward the street, where more neighbors had gathered. Many were familiar faces, people who had helped Marcus care for Hope in those early days. They spent the next hour refining plans, their different perspectives creating something stronger than either could have developed alone. Hope dozed between them, content in the presence of both his humans. "You know," James said as they prepared, "to leave. I used to think losing Max was the worst thing that could have happened. Now I wonder if it wasn't the best thing. For all of us." Marcus watched a team of workers installing the large windows that would flood the treatment rooms with natural light. "From loss to hope," he said, "seems to be a pattern with us." Speaking of hope, James nodded toward their dog. "I think someone's ready for his dinner." Hope perked up at the word, making both men laugh. Some things, like the bond between humans and animals, transcended all circumstances. As they walked out together, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how a single act of kindness had grown into something so much bigger than himself. The sign over the construction fence read, "Future Home of the Hope Animal Medical Center," and for the first time, Marcus truly believed in that future. The emergency veterinary clinic's waiting room was silent, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. Marcus sat with his head in his hands, his old journal clutched tightly. James paced, his limp more pronounced, without Hope's steady presence. Beside him, it had happened so quickly. One moment Hope was helping them inspect the newly installed rehabilitation pool at the center. The next he was struggling to breathe, his legs buckling beneath him. "It could be a relapse," Marcus had said, his professional calm warring with personal panic. The pneumonia might have caused lasting damage. Now they waited while Dr. Patterson, the city's best veterinary specialist, ran tests. The clock showed 3:47 a.m. "Tell me about when you first treated him," James said suddenly, stopping his pacing. "That first night, when everyone said he wouldn't make it." Marcus opened his journal with trembling hands, finding the familiar entry. He was so weak, but there was something in his eyes, this determination, like he knew he just had to hold on. "That's Max," James smiled faintly. "Even after my accident, when the pain was worst, he never gave up on me." The door opened, and Dr. Patterson emerged, her expression carefully neutral. Both men straightened. "The good news is, it's not a relapse," she began. "But we found something concerning in his chest X-rays. There's a mass pressing against his lung." The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. Marcus felt his professional knowledge warring with emotional denial. "Options?" James demanded, his businessman's instincts kicking in. "Surgery," Dr. Patterson replied. "It's risky at his age, but with his overall health and fitness level, he has a good chance. The alternative—" "Cost isn't an issue," James interrupted. "It's not about money," Marcus said quietly. "It's about what's best for Hope." He turned to Dr. Patterson. "Can we see him?" She led them to the treatment area. Hope lay on a padded, table connected to monitoring equipment but alert. His tail thumped weakly when he saw them. "Hey, buddy," Marcus murmured, checking the IV lines with practiced eyes. Hope pressed his head into Marcus's hand. James moved to the dog's other side, letting Hope lean against him. For a moment they were all connected, two men and the dog who had changed both their lives. "The surgery," James began, "has a 70% success rate," Marcus finished. "Better odds than he had that night at the auction." Hope looked between them, somehow managing to maintain his service dog alertness, even while ill. When James swayed slightly from fatigue, Hope still tried to shift to support him. "Easy, boy," James whispered. "Let us help you this time." "Doctor," Patterson cleared her throat. "If we're going to operate, it should be soon. I'll need consent from his legal owner." James and Marcus exchanged a look over Hope's head. The partnership agreement covered the medical center, but they'd never formally addressed Hope's ownership. "Both of us," they said simultaneously. "He's registered as my service dog," James explained, "but I have his adoption papers from the auction," Marcus added, "and we share his care." They finished together. Dr. Patterson raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. She handed them both consent forms. As they signed, Hope watched with what seemed like approval. Even now he was bringing them together, making them stronger. "The surgery will take several hours," Dr. Patterson explained. "You should get some rest." Neither man moved. "We'll wait," James said firmly. "I need to monitor his pre-op preparation anyway," Marcus added, pulling out his journal. Hope's tail thumped again, and for a moment his eyes seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. He had taught them both about hope, about trust, about the healing power of unconditional love. Now it was their turn to be strong for him. Throughout the long night, they kept vigil together. James shared stories about Max's training days, while Marcus detailed Hope's recovery milestones. Their voices blended with the soft beeping of monitors, creating a gentle symphony of concern and care. "Whatever happens," James said as dawn approached, "he brought us here. All of this, the center, the program, our partnership, it started because he saw something in both of us." Marcus nodded, adding a final note to his journal. "Some angels have 4 legs and teach us how to hope again." The sun was rising when Dr. Patterson returned in surgical scrubs. Hope lifted his head, ready as always to face whatever came next, secure in the love of both his humans. "It's time," she said softly. Together, James and Marcus stood to face another challenge, just as Hope had taught them, with courage, trust, and unwavering hope. The local newspaper headline read, "Hope Heals, the remarkable story behind the city's new animal medical center." Below it was a photo of Hope, lying between Marcus and James on the center's front steps, all three looking at ease despite their very different backgrounds. "I still think we should have declined the interview," Marcus said, setting the paper aside. He sat in what had become their usual spot, a quiet corner of Hope's recovery room at the center, where the morning sun streamed through the east-facing windows. "The story's already bringing in donations," James replied from his chair on Hope's other side. 3 more corporate sponsors since yesterday. Hope, sporting a neat line of stitches, but otherwise looking remarkably well, thumped his tail against the cushioned floor. 2 weeks after his surgery, he was already insisting on making his rounds, checking on the other animals in recovery. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rita from the old shelter poked her head in, followed by a stream of familiar faces. Mrs. Chen, Marco from the food truck, Tom the security guard, and others from the neighborhood. "We heard Hope was feeling better," Rita said, holding up a basket of treats. "Thought we'd have a little celebration." "The whole neighborhood's been asking about him," Mrs. Chen added, moving to scratch Hope's ears. "Such a good dog, bringing everyone together like this." Hope accepted the attention, regally maintaining his professional demeanor even while clearly enjoying the fuss. When an elderly visitor stumbled slightly, he still tried to rise to help, though Marcus gently kept him in place. "Rest, remember?" Marcus reminded him. "You're still recovering. Some things never change." James observed with a smile. Always. Trying to help, even when he's the one who needs helping. The room filled with well-wishers, each with a story about Hope, how they'd contributed to his care when he was sick, how they'd watched Marcus nurse him back to health, how they'd seen the incredible partnership form between the homeless vet, Tech, and the tech billionaire. "It's like a fairy tale," one of the shelter volunteers said, "but better because it's real." Sarah arrived with a stack of papers, raising her eyebrows at the impromptu gathering, but smiling nonetheless. "The contractor approval came through," she reported. "We can start on the East Wing expansion next week." "Perfect timing," James said. "The training program's already got a waiting list." The center had been open for just a month, but word had spread quickly. People came from across the city, drawn by the unique approach, medical care combined with training. No one turned away for lack of funds, and a staff that understood both animals and humans. "Did you see this morning's cases?" Marcus asked, pulling out his new journal. "The German Shepherd mix with hip dysplasia. Perfect candidate for the service training program. Already approved the scholarship." James nodded. "And I've been thinking about your idea for the pediatric therapy wing." They fell into shop talk, discussing plans and possibilities, while their visitors watched with knowing smiles. Hope dozed contentedly, secure in the presence of his humans and his extended family of caregivers. Later, after the visitors had gone, a young reporter from the local news station set up her camera in Hope's recovery room. "Just a few questions," she promised. "People want to know how this amazing partnership started." Marcus and James exchanged glances, then looked at Hope, who gazed back with his usual wisdom. "It started with hope," Marcus said simply. "Both the dog and the feeling. And trust," James added. "Sometimes the best partnerships come from learning to trust not just others, but yourself." "And now?" the reporter asked. "What's next for the center?" Before they could answer, a commotion arose from the main treatment area. A new emergency case arriving. Hope immediately lifted his head, alert despite his stitches. "Now we do what we've always done," Marcus said, rising. "We help whoever needs it, however we can. One animal, one person at a time," James agreed, following his partner's lead. The reporter watched them go, noting how naturally they moved together, how Hope watched over both with equal devotion, how 3 unlikely lives had woven together into something remarkable. Her final report would read, "In a city of millions, sometimes the greatest stories start with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes hope comes with 4 legs and a wagging tail. And sometimes, just sometimes, it changes everything." The key to Marcus's new apartment felt heavy in his hand as he stood outside his door, Hope waiting patiently beside him. After 6 months of living in temporary housing, he'd finally found a permanent home, a modest 2-bedroom just 3 blocks from the center. "What do you think, boy?" he asked, turning the key. "Ready for a real home?" Hope's tail wagged as they entered. The apartment was small by most standards, but to Marcus it felt like a palace. Natural light flooded the living room, and the kitchen had actual counter space, but it was the 2nd bedroom that meant the most. He'd converted it into a home office, with space for his medical journals and reference books. His old journal sat in a place of honor on the desk, its worn pages a testament to how far they'd come. Beside it lay his new one, filled with notes about current cases and future plans for the center. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. James stood there holding a housewarming gift. "Traditional good luck present," he said, handing over a potted plant. "Though I think we've had more than our share of luck already." Marcus welcomed him in, noting how James moved more smoothly these days. Regular physical therapy, combined with Hope's continued support, had strengthened his bad leg considerably. "The apartment's perfect," James approved, looking around. "Close to work, good neighborhood." "Still can't quite believe it's mine," Marcus admitted. "Keep expecting to wake up back at the loading dock." Hope moved between them, his presence a constant reminder of how much had changed. He wore his service vest proudly. They'd worked out a schedule where he split his time between James's physical therapy needs and Marcus's medical rounds at the center. "Speaking of changes," James said, settling onto the couch while Hope automatically positioned himself to provide support. "The board approved the expansion. We can start the satellite clinic program next month." Marcus sat in the armchair across from him, pulling out his tablet. "I've been working on the staffing plan. If we rotate the veterinary teams between the main center and the satellites..." They fell into easy shop talk, discussing logistics and possibilities. The center had already exceeded their initial goals, treating hundreds of animals and training dozens of service dog teams. But more importantly, it had become a community hub, a place where people from all walks of life came together to help, animals and each other. "Oh, and Sarah wanted me to remind you about tomorrow's presentation," James added. "The medical students from the university?" Marcus nodded, glancing at his notes. He'd been nervous about teaching at first, but had discovered a natural talent for it. His practical experience combined with genuine empathy made him a popular instructor. "Still planning to use Hope's case as the primary example," he said. "From critical care to recovery to service work, it covers all the major points. And quite a bit more." James smiled, watching Hope demonstrate his point by adjusting his position to better support James's weakened side. A comfortable silence fell between them. Through the window, they could see the lights of the city coming on as dusk approached. Somewhere out there, other people were facing the same struggles they had: loss, loneliness, the need for connection and purpose. "You know," Marcus said finally, "when I was homeless, the hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort. It was feeling invisible, like I didn't matter anymore." James nodded, understanding. "And now I know that everyone matters. Everyone has something to give." Marcus reached down to scratch Hope's ears. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them." "Like a sick dog at an auction?" James suggested. "Like a homeless vet tech and a lonely billionaire," Marcus countered with a smile. Hope looked between them, tail wagging gently. In many ways, he was still doing his most important work, not just as a service dog, but as a bridge between two worlds, a reminder that the best healing happened when people came together. "The center's changing lives," James said, "but I think it changed ours first." Marcus stood to show James some new training equipment he'd been designing. On his desk, both journals caught his eye. The old and the new, the story of loss and discovery, of endings and beginnings. "You know what the best part is?" he said, looking around his new home. "It's not just about having a place to live or a job to do. It's about having a purpose again. A way to help. That's what Hope taught us both," James agreed, rising with Hope's assistance, "that sometimes the best way to heal yourself is to help heal others." As they discussed plans for the center's future, Marcus felt the last traces of his old uncertainty fade away. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living, growing, making a difference. And he had a dog named Hope and a friend named James to thank for showing him the way. 1 year to the day after Marcus spent his last $20 at an auction, the Hope Animal Medical Center hosted its first graduation ceremony. The training room was filled with families, staff, and most importantly, newly certified service dog teams. Marcus stood at the podium, Hope sitting alertly beside him, while James watched from the front row. The sight of the graduating pairs, humans and dogs who had learned to trust, support, and heal each other, made his voice thick with emotion. "When I was at my lowest point," Marcus began, "someone very wise told me that sometimes the best way to find hope is to give it to others. At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. I was homeless, hopeless, with nothing to give but my last $20 and whatever knowledge I had left from my veterinary days." He looked down at Hope, who gazed back with eternal patience and wisdom. "But then I met this dog. Some of you know him as Max, others as Hope. I like to think both names fit him perfectly because he brought maximum hope to everyone he touched." In the audience, Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes, while Tom the security guard tried to pretend he wasn't getting emotional. The entire neighborhood had turned out for the ceremony, proud witnesses to what their community had helped create. Today, we're graduating 20 service dog teams, Marcus continued, but more than that, we're celebrating 40 lives changed. Because what we've learned here, what Hope taught us, is that healing goes both ways. When you help someone else, you also help yourself. James stood then, moving smoothly to join Marcus at the podium. Hope shifted position slightly, maintaining his supportive stance between both men, a living symbol of their partnership. 1 year ago, James took over. I was searching for a lost dog and found something much more valuable, a partnership that would change not just our lives, but the lives of countless others. He gestured to the graduating class. There was Michael, a veteran with PTSD, and his companion Luna, Sandra, a young girl with cerebral palsy, and her helper Rex. Each pair had their own story, their own journey from struggle to strength. The certificates you receive today, James continued, aren't just about completing training. They're about the bonds you've formed, the trust you've built, the hope you've given each other. Sarah appeared with a stack of certificates, each one bearing both James and Marcus's signatures, along with Hope's paw print, a touch Marcus had insisted on. One by one, the graduates came forward. Marcus handled the medical aspects of their final evaluations, while James presented the certificates. Hope acknowledged each dog that passed with a dignified nod, ever the professional. After the ceremony, during the reception, Marcus found himself back in his office. The two journals, old and new, sat on his desk, telling the story of his journey. The old one started during his clinic days and continued through homelessness, ended with Hope's recovery. The new one documented the center's growth, its successes, its future. Quite a change from the loading dock, isn't it? James said from the doorway. Marcus smiled, remembering those cold nights when all he had was a sick dog and desperate hope. Sometimes I still can't believe it. Believe it, James replied, entering with Hope at his side. You earned this, we all did. Through the window they could see the center's newly completed East Wing, dedicated entirely to rehabilitation and training. The waiting list for their programs now stretched months ahead, and their innovative approach had attracted attention from medical schools and veterinary programs across the country. You know what I realized? Marcus said, scratching Hope's ears. That night at the auction, when everyone else saw a dying dog, I saw Hope. Just like when you lost Max, you didn't just see a missing dog. You saw a chance to create something bigger than yourself. And Hope saw two people who needed each other, James added. Even if we didn't know it yet. Hope's tail wagged at his name, both names, and he pressed against both men's legs, still bringing them together even now. A commotion from the reception drew their attention. One of the graduating dogs had started demonstrating his skills, helping his human partner navigate the crowded room. The gathered crowd watched in amazement as dog and human moved as one, their trust and connection obvious to all. That's the real miracle, Marcus said softly. Not just that we help them, but that they'll go on to help others. The hope keeps spreading. Speaking of spreading, James pulled out his tablet, showing Marcus the plans for their next project, a national network of hope centers, bringing their unique approach to communities across the country. Think we're ready for that? Marcus asked. Hope barked once, decisively, making both men laugh. I think that's a yes, James said. They rejoined the reception, moving through the crowd of graduates, families, and supporters. The room buzzed with joy, with possibility, with hope. Every person there had a story, of struggle, of connection, of healing. And at the center of it all was a dog, with two names and two humans, who had taught each other that sometimes the greatest acts of love come from those who have the least to give, and that hope, like healing, is something that grows stronger when shared. The adoption certificate on Marcus's wall now bore both their names, official recognition of what they'd known all along, that some families are born, some are made, and some are brought together by a dog named Hope, who saw the best in everyone. End.